Hi, everybody. Our next playwright that we're going to cover of the great American playwrights is Thomas Lanier Williams. Mr. Williams was born in 1911. He was born in Mississippi, making him our first Southerner on this list. And Southerners are very different from Northerners for the most part. He died in 1983 in New York City, and he died a horrible way. He died doing something that I've seen students on campus doing. And if you're a person who does this, stop. Plastic bottles that everybody carries around with soda or water or whatever, and they have the little screw cap on them. Have you ever seen anybody on campus or just in your daily life, or perhaps you yourself, sometimes they'll be working on something and they'll have that bottle sitting right next to them, and they'll be working feverishly on something, and they'll take that cap and they'll just pop it in their mouth and kind of suck on the cap while they're working on stuff. I've seen people on campus doing it. Mr. Williams choked to death on a bottle cap in the middle of the night in his hotel room in New York City. When he didn't show up the next day for his appointments, his assistant came in and found him. Horrible way to die. That bottle cap's hard plastic. It's not going to disintegrate or go anywhere. It's just there. So he was born in Mississippi. He as a small child, he suffered a viral infection, which led to a thing called pleurisy, which caused, during his growth years, it caused one of his legs to grow slightly longer than the other, and it caused him to have a slight limp. Because of this infection, and because he was bedridden for a little while, and he was weak for a while, he wasn't the robust starting quarterback that his father wanted, and his father belittled him and ridiculed him. His father thought that he was a weak child, and he was embarrassed by him. Mr. Williams was not going to grow up and become a professional athlete, but what Mr. Williams possessed was an incredible brain. Mr. Williams' favorite person in his life were his grandparents, his grandfather and his grandmother. His grandfather was an Episcopal priest. We talked a little bit, I think, about Episcopalians when we were talking about Henry VIII, although if we didn't, here we go. The Christian world forever was Catholic, and then in the 1500s there was a king in England named Henry VIII, and he was married to a woman named Catherine of Aragon, and she had a daughter, and he needed a son, and he wanted a son, and he wanted to divorce Catherine and remarry a younger woman he had met named Anne, and so he petitioned the Pope for a divorce or an annulment of his marriage, and the Pope said no. And Henry said, okay, fine, if you're not going to grant me this divorce, then I am going to leave the Catholic Church, which was really the only existing Christian religion at the time. And if I leave the Catholic Church, since I am the King of England, then my entire country will leave the Catholic Church, and I'm going to found my own church and call it the Church of England, which I will be the head of. That's what he did. The Church of England were known, people who belonged to the Church of England were known as Anglicans. And when England came to America, the Church of England came to America, only instead of taking the name Anglican in America, it became known as Episcopalian. They are very much very similar to the Catholic religion. They have Mass, they have a lot is done in Latin, they have priests. The only difference is in the Episcopal Church, the priests can marry. So the Episcopal priest that was Thomas Lanier Williams' grandfather was one of his favorite people in the world. He really doted on his grandfather. His grandfather was very kind to him. His grandmother was very kind to him, even when his father wasn't. When Mr. Williams was about 6 years old, his father got a new job working for the International Shoe Company in St. Louis, Missouri, and moved the family from Mississippi to St. Louis. Now, back then, in the teens of America, in the 19-teens, if you lived in St. Louis, Missouri, and your family lived in Mississippi, it was a trip of a lifetime just to go visit them. Right now it takes about 4 hours to drive from Dallas to Houston. In 1918, it would take you about 12 hours because there was no major highways. There were no major highways in the United States. There was all just simple roads that you traveled on, or sometimes dirt roads that you traveled on, and cars didn't go very fast. So he didn't see his grandparents again after they moved to St. Louis. His grandfather passed while he was still a teenager, and so he didn't get to be with the people that he loved the most in the world. He graduated from high school, and he enrolled at the University of Missouri. And while he was at the University of Missouri during his freshman year, he joined a fraternity. His fraternity brothers found his thick Southern accent hilarious, and so they gave him a nickname. It was a nickname that would stick with him for the rest of his life, and he would, once he became famous, he would be known by this nickname, not by his real name, Thomas Lanier Williams. Now, his fraternity brothers got the state wrong. Mr. Williams was from Mississippi, but they got the state wrong, and they nicknamed him Tennessee. And for the rest of his life, he would be known as Tennessee Williams. He fell in love while he was at the University of Missouri with a young lady, and he wrote her poetry, and he wrote her short stories, and he wrote her long letters, and he wrote her short plays, and she didn't feel the same way. And his heart was absolutely crushed, so much so that he dropped out of school at the University of Missouri, and he lived with his parents, and he went to work with his father at the International Shoe Company, a job he hated. And his mother would describe that he would come home from work and he would fix himself a pot of black coffee, and he would retire to his bedroom, where all night long she would hear the click-clack of his typewriter as he was writing, and she would quite often come in the morning to his bedroom to wake him up for work and find him slumped asleep over his desk, cold coffee in the coffee cup, and a mound of cigarette butts in his ashtray. He worked for the International Shoe Company for a while. He really, really detested it, and he continued to, he had a sister named Rose. He had a younger brother named Walter. He continued to work for the International Shoe Company. He continued to write at night. And then finally, he had a nervous breakdown and he left his job. In the mid-30s, his mother separated from his father. They never divorced. In 1936, he enrolled at Washington University in St. Louis, where he wrote a play called Me, Vasya. In 1937, he transferred to the University of Iowa, where he graduated with a bachelor's degree in English. He later went to New York City and studied at the Dramatic Workshop. He continued to write. He struggled. He worked many odd jobs. He was a caretaker on a chicken ranch. He was a janitor. He was a gardener. In 1939, he received a $1,000 grant from the Rockefeller Foundation. Now, $1,000 today, it's a good chunk of money, but you would go through it pretty quickly today. In 1939, $1,000 was an immense amount of money, and it enabled him to move to New Orleans, Louisiana, and take up writing full time. And while he was in New Orleans, a play that he had written got a production in Chicago. And it was very successful in Chicago, and the Chicago newspapers were writing all about it, and audiences were selling it out. And one night, a director, a famous director that I talked about when I talked about Arthur Miller, a director named Elia Kazan. Remember, he was the one who named names to the House Un-American Activities Committee on Communism. Elia Kazan was in the audience, and he went up to Mr. Williams afterward and said, "I would like to take your play to Broadway." And in 1944, The Glass Menagerie opened on Broadway, and it would be a huge critical success, and audiences loved it, and it would make Mr. Williams' name and start him on the road to financial success. The Glass Menagerie was about the main character was a character named Tom. His name was Thomas. The main character worked at the International Shoe Company. So did Thomas Williams. The main character hated it. The main character wanted to be a writer. So did Thomas Tennessee Williams. The main character lived with his mother and his sister. His father appeared in the play, but only as a photograph, because in the play, the character's father had deserted the family. And that's how Tennessee Williams felt about his dad. He threw some heavy shade on his dad by making him a character in a play that everybody talked bad about and only appeared as a photograph. So the play was very autobiographical. It enabled him the financial success to really take off writing. And in 1947, he secured his reputation. Now, if you've already watched All My Sons, as I have assigned you to do on Digital Theater Plus, because you're going to have to write a paper about it. In 1947, when All My Sons came out, it was beaten for the Tony Award for Best Play, and it was beaten for the Pulitzer Prize for Best Play by a play called A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams. And A Streetcar Named Desire is the third of the three great masterpieces of the American theater. They are Long Day's Journey into Night by Eugene O'Neill, Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller, Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams. It made him exceedingly famous. He went on to write other brilliant works. One of my favorites that he wrote was called Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Cat on a Hot Tin Roof is my favorite of Tennessee Williams, and I'm going to tell you the story of it now. Cat on a Hot Tin Roof takes place at the family estate of the Pollitt family, Pollit. And the Pollitt family is the wealthiest family in all of Louisiana. And so the estate is very large. Pollitt Enterprises, which is the family-owned company, is the largest company in Louisiana. And it's run by the character of Big Daddy. Big Daddy is a large, robust man who is the wealthiest man in all of Louisiana. Big Daddy is 70 years old, and he is looking toward his retirement, and he is trying to figure out who he's going to leave the company to. Big Daddy has two sons. He has a son named Gooper. What a funny name. And Gooper is married. Gooper has 5 kids of his own. So if he left the company to Gooper, then he would know that the company would stay in the family through several generations. The only problem is that Gooper is an idiot, and Big Daddy knows it. And he's afraid if he leaves the business to Gooper, then Gooper will squander it and end up running the business into financial ruin. Big Daddy's other son is his favorite son. His name is Brick. What a manly name. Brick is a former football hero, football and track and field hero in high school, football hero in college, and he's Big Daddy's favorite son. Brick is married to Maggie. Maggie is the most beautiful, sexiest woman in all of Louisiana. She comes from the wrong side of town. She comes from the poor side of town, according to Big Daddy. But she married Brick, so she married into wealth. At the beginning of the play, Brick is he's on crutches because he has broken his leg. Brick's best friend in the world, Skipper, has been killed in an automobile accident. Brick's best friend. And Brick, in his grief, before the play begins, Brick has gone to the high school stadium where he and Skipper were the stars of the football team. And Brick has gotten very drunk, and he's begun running around the track like he used to in his youth. And he starts jumping over hurdles. Now, if you've seen a hurdle on a track and field, it's designed like this, and people run it and they jump over it as they race. A hurdle is designed like this so that if somebody hits the hurdle, it falls. Well, Brick ran the wrong way, and when he hits the hurdle, it doesn't move, and Brick fell and broke his leg. So at the beginning of the play, Brick is on crutches. He's got a cast on his leg. The entire play, Maggie is trying to get her husband to have sex with her. A, because she wants to have sex with her husband. B, because she needs to get pregnant. Cooper has all the kids. Brick and Maggie have no kids. If Maggie can get pregnant, this will seal the deal for Big Daddy leaving the company and the finances to Brick and Maggie. If she can get pregnant, if she can't, then maybe he doesn't leave the business to them. So she needs to get pregnant because there's a secret. There's a secret that only she knows. The reason Brick was so upset about his best friend Skipper being killed in a car accident was not just because Skipper was his best friend. Brick is gay, and he was in love with Skipper. So Maggie spends the entire play, and she's the most beautiful, sexiest woman in all of Louisiana. She spends the entire play trying to get her husband to have sex with her. But he's gay. And it gets even worse. She doesn't just want to have sex with him because he's her husband. She doesn't just want to have sex with him because he's good looking. She doesn't just want to have sex with him because she needs to get pregnant. She is desperately, genuinely, and deeply in love with him. That's so sad. There's another secret that's going on. Big Daddy's been experiencing a lot of pain. And so he's gone to the doctors and he's had all these tests run. It all takes place, the play takes place on Big Daddy's birthday. The results have come back from the doctor, but the family has hidden them from Big Daddy because the results tell us Big Daddy's dying. The cancer is eating him up inside. They keep the secret from Big Daddy. Now, you're going to watch some clips from Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and in these clips, you're going to hear a word, and the word is mendacity. Mendacity. M-E-N-D-A-C-I-T-Y. Mendacity. It's a great word. It's a wonderful college word. It means lies, liars, and a system of lying. The opposite of mendacity is veracity. V-E-R-A-C-I-T-Y. Veracity. It means truth, truth tellers, and a system of truth. Mendacity, veracity. Beautiful words. Beautiful words. Now, what separates Mr. Williams from Arthur Miller and from Eugene O'Neill was that all of Mr. Williams' incredibly brilliant plays also became incredibly successful movies. Incredibly successful movies that introduced to the world really great actors or showcased young actors who would go on and become great. A Streetcar Named Desire introduced to the world, the Broadway production, and then this man starred in the film as well, introduced to the world the person who would become on everybody's list one of the top 10 actors of all time, a man by the name of Marlon Brando. And you're going to see him in a clip from A Streetcar Named Desire. Now, you have to realize that in the 1950s, most men did not exercise. Most men did not exercise. Most people did not exercise. In fact, they were afraid that if you exercised too much, it would lead to a heart attack. Well, of course it would if you're out of shape and you start exercising all of a sudden. You have to take it slowly and build up. But science didn't understand that. So most people were a little heavier, a little doughier. Not Marlon Brando. In his youth, Marlon Brando exercised, and he had a look and a sexuality about him that women all over America went, oh my gosh. They couldn't believe they were seeing this in films. You have to realize, in 1939, the very first curse word ever appeared in a major motion picture. It was in Gone with the Wind. In 1939, at the end of the movie, Scarlett O'Hara says, "But what's going to become of me?" And Rhett Butler, the man who she has been kind of in love with, looks at her and says, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." And America went, oh my gosh, did you hear them curse? First time in 1939. 1950s is not that long afterwards. All the time, with every generation, societal norms change. And what is acceptable in society changes as the world changes. And so when the world was introduced to Marlon Brando, the world was like, oh my gosh, they had never seen anything like him before. Then when you get to the clips on Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, you're going to see people like Maggie, played by Elizabeth Taylor. Oh, I never explained the title for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, because Maggie is trying to balance her life. She needs to get pregnant. She's married to a gay husband. She's in love with him. And she knows that if she doesn't get pregnant and all the money gets left to Gooper, once Big Daddy dies, Brick's going to throw her out. So she is struggling and fighting to keep her balance in the world, like a cat on a hot tin roof. It doesn't want to fall off, but it's also trying to keep from getting burned. That's Maggie. Her nickname is Maggie the Cat. She's played in the film by Elizabeth Taylor, one of the most beautiful film actresses of all time. Brick was played by the young, studly Paul Newman, who would go on to a major A-list iconic career. Okay, so this is today's lecture on Thomas Lanier, Tennessee Williams. Now, it's really sad. Mr. Williams didn't have any hit plays after about 1965. Mr. Williams was in real life himself gay. He entered a long-term relationship with a single person. They were together for almost 20 years. They were deeply in love with each other. He became incredibly wealthy, Mr. Williams did, because of the films. Not just the plays, but the screenplays that he wrote of his plays that became huge hit movies. He traveled the world. His partner was a man named by the name of Frank Merlo. And Mr. Merlo died in the late 1960s. And Mr. Williams in the 70s did what a lot of stars or artists did in the 1970s. He began to experiment with hallucinogenic drugs, particularly LSD. And he continued to write, but his writing grew very, very strange. And he submitted them to be produced places, and occasionally somebody would produce one of them, but a lot of them went unproduced while he was alive because they were so weird and so bizarre and frankly not very good. I mean, can you imagine if you're running a small theater and this multiple Pulitzer Prize winning, Tony Award winning playwright contacts you and said, hey, I've written a new play, I'd like your theater to be the first one to produce it. You'd be like, oh my gosh, it's Tennessee Williams, absolutely. And then you get it and read it and go, this is horrible. A lot of his plays in the 70s were absolutely dreadful. And he couldn't understand why nobody liked his work. It's very sad. And then he died in 1983. When he died, all of the rights for the copyrights, remember we talked about copyright with James Barrie and Peter Pan, all of the rights, all the copyright ownership of his plays, all the rights of his everything that he had written, he left to the University of the South. The University of the South, a place he had never even visited. Now, why would he do that? I mean, can you imagine that the president of the university is sitting in his office one day and he hears the phone ring outside in the secretary's desk, and the secretary comes in and she says, sir, you know who Tennessee Williams is, right? And he says, of course, everybody in the world who was at all educated knew who Tennessee Williams was. And she said, well, he died and he left all of the ownership of all of his materials to us. Now, why would he do that? The University of the South is the college that his beloved grandfather had attended when he was young, a place Tennessee Williams had never even visited. And so he left all of his money and the copyright ownership of his materials to this university in honor of his grandfather, the Episcopal priest. Okay, check out these clips, a couple of clips from Tennessee Williams. Watch All My Sons. If you haven't already, watch it because you need to write a paper. I sent you information about how to do that paper. Some of you have not even taken the midterm yet. Get on it. Bye.